Oh, nice. Morning, Trainiacs. Weather is beautiful. It's like, try to speak American lingo, like 82? How many kilojoules is that? So with all this extra time on my hands this year with no racing, I've thought, what was the perfect race that I've done? Now, I've done a 4:28 half-Ironman, a 9:41 Ironman, and you might just be saying like, well, isn't the perfect race the one where you went fastest? No. Well, personally, I think that the perfect race that I've done is a 4:36 half-Ironman, but the reason that it is slower than my PB half-Ironman is because the ratio of the amount of hours that I spent to train for it is phenomenal. I think the average amount of training hours that I did was like 8 hours, 30 minutes every week, whereas the 4:28 was somewhere around 13 hours. And that's normal. You're going to get diminishing returns the more you train. But fact of the matter is that most of you out there can't train 13, 15, 20 hours a week. So we have to look at, well, what is an efficient amount of training? So today I'm going to outline the principles that I used in that 8-hour, 30-minute training week that'll hopefully allow you to get as much as you can out of the hours that you have to have your perfect race. Alright, so Trainiacs, the first thing that I want to show you is what my workout week looked like in 2018, because this is something that I would actually recommend that if you're in this situation where these are your time constraints and these are your goals, by all means, you can duplicate this. So this is a page that we have on teamtrainiac.com where to help people figure out how much they need to train and what a good workout week schedule looks like, you just have to click a few buttons. So in my case, what I had time for was about 12 workouts a week. So go 12 workouts a week, and I wanted to work on my swim the most. So that's what I worked on. And then I had a half Ironman here, and I wanted to be competitive. So what that tells me is, all right, well, 11 to 14 workouts is about right for what you need to do to be competitive, and somewhere on average of 8.5 to 9.5 hours of training per week is what you can expect. That's the average. Of course, it went up from there to a peak of around, I think, 12.5 hours per week, but that was the average, 8.5 to 9.5. And then the weekly schedule here, I had to make a small little change, but this was basically it. And the only change that I made, I went like this. I had an intense bike on Tuesday, and it was followed by an intense run. I actually did this because I was really time crunch, fairly busy in 2018. I did my intense run right after the bike. So I had 4 swims. The swims with the main swim, the key swim, that was actually about 60 to 90 minutes. Looks like I've got an update to run in the app here. The main swim of 60 to 90 minutes was Monday. Just a steady kind of endurance building swim of about 45 to 60 minutes was Wednesday. 45 to 60 minutes of a technique focused swim was Thursday. And then I just did an open water, easy 30 to 40 minute recovery swim on Sunday after my run. Running, because I was a little bit banged up and my running was decent, but I didn't want to risk injury, so I didn't want to load up on running. I wanted to be efficient with running. I had my main long run going up to just 90 minutes on Sunday, but I'll tell you what I did to make that work. And then I had about a 10 to 15 minute brick on Saturday, my intense run, which I did as a brick on Tuesday, and that was all the running that I did. As far as biking, I had one really intense ride of about 45 to 60 minutes on Tuesday, another tempo ride of around 45 to 60 minutes on Wednesday, then a really easy recovery ride on Friday, and then the main ride, which was quite a bit longer, and I'll explain what I did with that, was on Saturday. and I threw in a strength session on Thursday. So that was the training plan. But let's get into the 7 keys, the key things that I did in swim, bike, run, and just overall training plan creation that I think made it so efficient, and what we feel makes teamtrainiac.com, plug, so efficient. So let's start off with the bike. It's the biggest portion of a race, and I wanted to make sure that it was as effective a training schedule as possible while not taking up so much time. You could spend tens of hours on the bike and reach those diminishing returns, but I wanted to be efficient. The first thing that I did to make the ride efficient was I knew that I needed to have one day that was big focus on endurance, where the main focus was building endurance, going long, and building up almost all the endurance that I need for the race on the bike. It's hard to go for a 4 or 5 hour run or a 4 or 5 hour swim, but you can certainly go for a 4 or 5 hour bike, and that endurance on the bike transfers over to the entire race. So what I ended up doing was that one long ride a week, I made quite long, longer than I had ever done a typical long ride for. So this long ride averaged somewhere around 115 to 135 kilometers, like upwards of 4 hours. That said, it was really easy, and 80-20 polarized training. I don't want to overtrain myself. Sometimes the purpose is to go really hard, sometimes the purpose is to go really long. And long and hard isn't typically a workout that I recommend doing, because there's not a whole lot of benefit to it. You're just suffering for longer. So that was the first thing I did. I went long, sufficiently long, we call that an over distance ride, and build up massive amounts of endurance. The second thing that I did is when I went intense on the bike, I went really intense. I turned myself inside out on the old Zwift setup. There was a lot of pain and grimacing in these videos back then. But it resulted in good performance. I ended up biking in the half-Ironman World Championship that year, 2:26:58. Not my best bike, not even close, but it was a very hard bike course with really rough surface. So that 2:26, probably comparable to a 2:20 on another course. And the benefit of that really intense ride, where the goal was to accumulate roughly a total of between 15 and 25 total minutes at very high intensities to work on that Vo2 Max. What you need to build with a proper triathlon training plan is you need to build endurance and an ability to oxidize fat as fuel, which we did with the long ride, and you need to have a nice high Vo2 Max. So those two rides accomplish a lot of what we need to accomplish with a well-designed triathlon training plan. It just hurts. But the benefit of it is that it doesn't take as long. You can really make a nice efficient workout in a grand total of, like, most of our workouts on Team Trainiac on the bike are between 40 and 55 minutes for the intense and the tempo bikes. That's it. The third thing I did with that plan that was a real driver of success within a short amount of training time was that I made every run count. Because running is so likely to cause injury, I ended up limiting the running to just those few times a week. That meant that all of those runs had to be really beneficial. So instead of just going and logging miles, what I ended up doing was I made the long run that really wasn't that long, only about 90 minutes, I made it on hills and trails to build that proprioception, that body awareness, that muscular endurance, that essentially strength-based running on those hills and trails. I made the intense run really intense, really neuromuscularly top-end kind of effective sort of stuff. And then if I ever had a second workout in the day that was supposed to be a run, instead of doing it later in the day, I did it as a brick run, because a brick run, in my opinion, you can basically have the time that you're going to run and still make it as effective. So instead of doing like a 30-minute run later in the day, I did a 15-minute brick run immediately after a bike, which I feel is just as effective as that 30-minute run later in the day. Now, the downside to this, I gave up a little bit of endurance. In the Ironman World Championship, I ended up kind of fading a little bit to around the 15-kilometer mark and really had to suck it up for the final 6 kilometers of the half marathon, but I still posted, I think it was a 1:34:56 run time. Now the fourth key to making that race successful with a limited amount of time was when it came to the swim. What I did have was a membership to the Tower 26 training plan, which we have based a lot of my beliefs on swim training about. One of the things that age group triathletes battle is that even at most we're swimming 4 or 5 times a week, so we're just not swimming a lot, so we have to be really, really effective. So I would encourage you to not just go and swim and swim and swim and swim and swim and think that it's going to be beneficial for you. You've got to swim with a purpose. And because most of us age group triathletes aren't coming into triathlon with really good technique, we need a well-designed training plan that ends up encouraging that good technique while allowing us to still build up swim endurance. The fifth key was that I built up a ton of low intensity endurance training from January all the way up until April or so. You know, we talk about 80-20, where 80% of your training is at low heart rates and 20% is at high heart rates, or polarized training that's very similar. Well, that's 80-20 over the course of a year. So what I end up recommending people do is making it more like 95-5 or even 100-0. And then gradually it turns from 100-0 in the off season and the base building season to 90-10, then to 80-20, then to 70-30. So you're gradually, as you're able to absorb more and more intensity, you are able to execute it instead of just going from easy to hard. So big volumes of low intensity training in the off season and the base building season. The second to last thing that I did was I supported all of this training with key recovery sessions. And not just sessions, but like so much of the focus, because I was coming off of a year of being overtrained and being fairly delicate, which I am now, so that proves that I definitely was then. I wanted to prioritize recovery and making sure that I wasn't ever pushing too hard. So when I had an easy session, it was an easy session. We're talking like 100 watts average for those recovery rides. For the recovery swims, nothing but floaty pants and pull buoys and fins, going easy. And then I made sure that I slept 7.5 to 8 hours a night. I ate around all of my workouts, so I didn't come into any workouts underfueled, and I didn't go out of any workouts being underfueled. Whereas in the previous season, I hadn't really prioritized recovery at all, and I worked harder and didn't get any faster. All of a sudden now, I was working easier and getting faster. And then the final thing that I did that I alluded to before is that every workout had a purpose. And that purpose wasn't always just to have a good killer workout. Sometimes the purpose was to build Vo2 Max and have a killer workout. Other times the purpose was to build endurance, and there was nothing killer about it besides I was just on a bike for 4 hours, but it was super easy. Other times the purpose was literally just to be on a bike and have no more than an average wattage of 100 watts, and the entire purpose was recovery. So every workout, regardless of what I did, it always had an intention, and that intention wasn't always just to turn me inside out. So those 7 things allowed me to perform really well without spending a ton of time. Now, is that what is going to get me to Kona or get you to Kona? Likely not. You are going to have to push a little bit harder and, ride that razor's edge of maybe a little bit too much beyond being healthy. And then you really have to start prioritizing recovery and sleep and making sure that you're blood testing regularly and you are doing multiple tests throughout the year, because going beyond that 10 hours, you end up getting into diminishing returns and you start affecting your health potentially negatively. But if that's what you're looking to do, and you know that that's what you're looking to do, that's okay. But for most of us who just want to have as good a race as we can without spending too much time, now you have the 7 keys that I found really helped me that hopefully will help you. So if you aren't already subscribed and you like this video, hit that subscribe button below. We come out with these types of videos a couple times a week. Later, Trainiacs. By the way, what do you think of the new lighting? Softbox here, colorful lighting. Let me know in the comments. I feel fancy.